I thought it was just a wrong number, a late-night glitch that woke me at 2:47 a.m. But after I answered, the shadows in my house began to move, and the walls started to remember things I never told them. Some voices came from outside, others whispered from the mirror. And once I picked up, I couldn't hang up. It happened in late November, in a 2-story brick townhouse on the quiet edge of Iverson Street, 3 blocks from the old rail line and just far enough from the city that the nights felt larger than the sky. The temperature had dropped below freezing, and the radiators made their dry ticking sounds through the walls. I was alone. My name is Lola, I am 35, and the house was finally mine after a spring of repainting and a summer of small repairs that never seemed to end. I went to bed around midnight with the hall light on, because I had not yet learned how the darkness sat in this house. I remember the exact minute it began because the red digits on the bedside alarm were the brightest thing in the room. At 2:47 a.m. stationary phone rang downstairs. I had not used it since moving in. It was an old wired handset that came with the place, mounted in the narrow passage by the stairs. I did not give that phone my number. I did not know if it even had one. The second ring woke me cleanly, like jumping into cold water. On the third, I got up and pulled on a rope, listening for the usual night noises. The house answered with the long wood bones creak that every older place gives when someone moves. I told myself it was just heat shifting. Still, I noticed the hall light had dimmed, as if the bulb were breathing. I went down. The phone rang a 4th time, and on the 5th I picked it up. At first there was only the kind of silence that has shape, the hush you get when a microphone is open in an empty room. Then, the faintest whisper, almost behind me rather than inside the line, said, "You should not have moved the mirror." I did not speak. I could hear my own breathing enter the call and come back thinner. The whisper did not repeat. What came after was a soft scrape, like a fingernail over cloth, and an airless click. The call ended. I stood there with the receiver against my ear, counting. The radiator in the front room ticked again. Somewhere above me, a small thud ran along the ceiling, as if a careful foot had tested a floorboard. I set the phone down and turned toward the stairs, meaning to check the upper hallway with my phone light, and that was when a colder shadow crossed the landing, a moving absence that did not match the line of the banister or my own outline on the wall. I went up anyway. The hallway smelled faintly of dust and old varnish. In the spare room at the end, the door I always left ajar was now open wider, and the lamp I had unplugged after reading the night before buzzed as if struggling to find power it was not connected to. I pulled the chain once on habit, and nothing changed. I left the room. I should say now that the mirror the voice mentioned was not part of any decoration I loved. It was a tall, speckled thing with wavy glass that I had carried here from my mother's house before the sale was final. I leaned it temporarily in the upstairs corridor a week ago to keep it out of the way. I had meant to hang it in the entry or give it to a thrift store. That afternoon, I had shifted it closer to the bedroom so I would stop bumping my shoulder on it. That is the movement the voice remembered. I reached my bedroom and stood in the doorway. The mirror faced the bed at a slight angle and showed me as a darker figure within a dark frame. I lifted my phone and used the camera to brighten the view. In the screen, the reflection was flatter than the room, too still, as if the lens made the night more honest than my eyes would allow. When I lowered the phone, there was a sound in the hall, a careful sigh like someone making room for themselves against the wall. I filmed for a minute. When I checked the recording, I saw only the lamplit geometry of my room and the blank slice of the mirror, but the motion indicator on the home security app had triggered in the front room downstairs at the exact time I was standing still. I replayed the clip twice. On the third time through, in the distant corner of the frame, the line of the closet door seemed a fraction closer to closed. I told myself to stop it. I returned the phone to the charger and sat on the bed. The house settled around me with soft carpentry noises. The radiator clicked. The hall light gave a dim pulse. I lay back and watched the mirror, willing it to show me nothing. It showed me nothing until it showed me a small fracture at the top left corner, a white hairline that had not been there earlier. It ran a centimeter and stopped. Then another one opened, as if something had pushed from the other side and rested. I got up and went downstairs to the little desk in the dining nook where the Wi-Fi router blinked. I opened the call log for the landline service, a basic internet add-on I kept because it was bundled with the plan. There was a single incoming call at 2:47, listed as unknown origin, duration 13 seconds. I clicked details. The number field was blank. The name field was blank. The app offered me the option to block the caller and failed when I tried. I listened again to the line in my head. You should not have moved the mirror. I knew that voice. It was not my mother. It was not a stranger. It sounded like me, thinner with distance, as if the words had come from the other side of a pane of old glass. The next night came heavy and windless. Snow was threatening in the forecast, but the air still hung wet and still, like breath caught before a word. I tried to busy myself with small things, washing cups, folding clothes, but every sound in the house felt like an echo that didn't wait for me to make it first. I kept the mirror covered with a blanket, telling myself it was silly. Still, as I walked past it, I could feel something like a faint pulse from the air, static, maybe, or the hum of the radiator trapped inside the walls. When I stopped, the sound stopped. Around midnight, the old floor under the window gave a sharp pop. It wasn't the first time I'd heard would settle, but this was different. It was followed by another sound, a slow dragging, like fabric sliding against the floorboards. I switched on the hallway light. There was nothing. Only the shape of my own shadow stretching across the carpet. But when I moved, it didn't. It stayed where it was, a black outline with my same shape, except it lagged, half a second behind. I waved my hand. It followed late. I whispered, "What are you?" And for a moment, it tilted its head, slower than mine, deliberate. My body went cold in pieces, starting from the throat down to the fingertips. The phone in my pocket vibrated. The home security app blinked, motion detected, living room. I crept to the stairs. The sound from below was low and rhythmic, a hollow bump every few seconds. When I looked down, the light at the bottom flickered once and held. I thought about calling someone, anyone, but who do you call when your shadow won't listen to you? I decided to record. I opened my camera and filmed the staircase. The video showed only an empty hallway, still and quiet. But when I replayed it, there was a whisper layered under the background hum. It was faint, almost lost in the static, but I could make out the words. "Don't turn off the light." I stopped the playback. The sound repeated, this time not from the phone but from the air itself. It came from behind me, close enough that the end of my hair moved. I ran the light switches up and down, flooding every room. The brightness hurt my eyes, but I couldn't stand the dark corners. I stayed awake until morning, sitting on the couch, waiting for sunlight to hit the windows. When it did, everything looked normal again. The shadow moved with me, obedient. I told myself it had been a trick of nerves, the way sleep deprivation makes the world ripple at the edges. That afternoon, I went to the small police outpost 2 streets away. The officer behind the desk was kind enough, maybe mid-40s, a little tired. I explained about the strange call, the movement alerts, the noises at night. He listened, nodded, then asked if I'd recently had trouble with neighbors or exes. I shook my head. He typed a few notes, printed a small slip, and said, "If you see someone physically inside, call us right away. Otherwise, try to rest. These houses settle, especially in the cold." I wanted to believe him. That night, I turned off all lights except the one by my bed. I left the phone charging beside me, recording just in case. I must have fallen asleep sometime after 3, because when I woke, the house was quiet, but the air wasn't empty. There was a shape by the door. At first, I thought it was the coat rack. Then it turned slightly, as though it had heard my breath. The lamp flickered. For half a second, I saw a figure standing still, the same height as me, same posture, same long robe I wore. I didn't move. Neither did it. When the lamp steadied, the figure was gone. I lay there, heart pounding, telling myself it was my reflection from the mirror through the half-open door. But the mirror was covered. I got up, step by step, and approached the hallway. The air felt heavier there, as if something had shifted closer but stayed just beyond sight. I touched the blanket over the mirror. It was cold, not room cold, but cold like metal left outside in winter. I pulled the fabric away. My reflection looked normal for a second. Then, slowly, the image blinked even though I hadn't. It blinked once, twice, with a faint shimmer crossing the glass like ripples on water. A thin crack appeared in the corner of the mirror, the same as the night before, only longer now, reaching toward the center. The sound of it forming was not glass breaking, it was softer, wetter, like something sliding beneath the surface. Behind my reflection, for just an instant, another shadow moved across the background. It was mine, but not exactly. It turned its head the wrong way, like it had been watching me from the inside out. The crack stopped growing, and the room went silent again. My phone buzzed from the bed, another motion alert. This time it said, "Motion detected, bedroom, 2:47 a.m. I turned to look at the bed. The blanket was still, but I could see the dent on the pillow where my head had been, fresh, like someone still lay there. The morning after that night was so quiet that even the birds outside sounded distant, as if the world had taken one step back from me. I sat at the kitchen table with a cup of cold coffee, watching sunlight crawl slowly across the tiles. The phone lay beside me, the screen black, but I couldn't bring myself to check the camera roll. I was afraid of finding proof, or worse, finding nothing at all. Eventually I pressed play. The recording showed my room bathed in the dim light of the bedside lamp. I could see myself sleeping, occasionally shifting under the blanket. The timestamp moved past 2:47 a.m. and stopped at 2:51. That was when the sound started. It was faint at first, like the house sighing, then clearer, a whisper, low and close to the microphone. I turned the volume higher. The voice said words that froze me where I sat. "It's not your house anymore." It was my own voice. I replayed it 5 times. Each time, the tone sounded different, once fearful, once calm, once angry, but always mine. I looked up, and the reflection in the kitchen window seemed to tilt slightly before I did, almost as if it wanted to see my reaction. I called the service provider again to ask if the landline could have been hacked. The man on the other end sounded puzzled. "There's no registered landline under your name," he said. "Your internet plan doesn't include one." I told him there was a wall phone in my house that had rung 2 nights ago. He paused. "Ma'am, if that number existed before, it was deactivated years ago. You probably just heard interference. Interference doesn't whisper your name." That afternoon I decided to search through the attic, hoping to find an explanation, wiring, old boxes, anything. The stairs to the attic were narrow and stiff, each step squealing under my weight. The air up there smelled of dust and dried paint. In the far corner, beneath a faded tarp, I found an old wooden crate with my mother's handwriting on it. I hadn't seen that writing since the day of the fire. Inside the box were things I half remembered from childhood: a cracked photograph frame, small jars of melted wax, bundles of dried herbs, and a folded cloth that wrapped something heavy. When I unwrapped it, I found a shard of mirror, about the size of my hand. Its edges were blackened, as if it had survived heat. On the back, scratched deep into the metal layer, was a sequence of digits, 7 numbers, no area code. I sat there staring at it. The mirror shard felt strangely warm, like a living pulse beneath the surface. I realized then that the tall mirror upstairs was missing a piece at the corner, exactly that shape. By evening, curiosity outweighed fear. I wanted to know where those numbers led. I went downstairs, connected my mobile to speaker, and dialed. The line clicked once, twice. Then someone answered. "Hello?" I said. Silence. I could hear faint static and, beneath it, breathing that matched my rhythm too precisely. Then, in the same tone as my own voice, a whisper. "Now I can come back." The phone fell from my hand. The air in the room changed, heavier, thicker, as if the temperature dropped instantly. The curtains swayed though the windows were shut. The ceiling light flickered 3 times and steadied, casting the whole room in a pale yellow haze. I turned toward the staircase. The blanket I had draped over the mirror was on the floor, neatly folded. For a long time I just stood there, staring at it. The glass reflected more light than it should have. It looked deeper, like the room on the other side was brighter than mine. I took one step closer. My reflection waited, frozen, but the space behind me in the mirror was wrong. It showed the kitchen, not the bedroom, as if the mirror remembered a different angle of the house. Something tapped lightly from inside the glass. Once, twice. Then again, in perfect rhythm with my heartbeat. I turned and fled to the kitchen, forcing myself to breathe. The phone was still on the floor. I could see the call duration still running, 3 minutes and 12 seconds. I hadn't hung up, yet the line was silent. I pressed the speaker button again. From the phone, faint and distant, came the sound of footsteps. My own. I recognized the creak pattern of the hallway boards above me. The sound went from one side of the room to the other, stopped, and then a voice, my voice, whispered into the receiver. "I'm already here." I dropped the phone. The house groaned. Every wooden joint seemed to stretch at once. From the floor above, something began to walk slowly, heel first, as though testing its weight on each plank. It moved toward the stairs, step by step. I grabbed a kitchen knife, though it felt useless, and stood at the bottom of the stairs listening. The steps stopped halfway. Then came a different sound, the same slow scrape I'd heard the night of the first call, like someone dragging a heavy object along the wall. I forced myself to speak. "Who's there?" "Nothing." The silence pressed hard against my ears. Then the hallway light at the top of the stairs flickered to life on its own. It stayed on just long enough for me to see it, something tall and dark standing near the mirror, its outline too sharp to be smoke, too still to be alive. It leaned forward slightly, mimicking my tilt of the head. Then the bulb burst, and everything went dark. I ran outside without a coat, stood in the freezing air until my breath turned to fog, and stared at the windows. The upstairs one glowed faintly from within, even though no lights were on. A silhouette moved past the glass. It was me, or something that wanted to be. When I went back inside, the phone on the kitchen floor had gone silent. The call timer read 6 hours 66 minutes, an impossible number. And on the screen, where the contact name should have been, it simply said, Lola. That night, sleep never came. Every noise inside the house felt deliberate, the creak of the radiator, the whisper of wind through old frames, even the small ticking of the kitchen clock. By 3 in the morning, I was sitting in the hallway, staring at the mirror. I had pushed it flat against the wall, covered it again, but the air around it still trembled like heat over asphalt. I decided I couldn't stay. I called a friend, but the call didn't go through. The signal bars flickered and disappeared. When I looked down, the phone's wallpaper had changed. Where my usual photo had been, there was now a grainy image of my own staircase, empty, except for a faint shape at the top step. I dropped the phone and backed away. Every light in the house flickered at once, not in random pulses but together, in rhythm. The sound that followed wasn't loud, it was worse, soft and steady, like a long exhale moving through the walls. From the living room came a slow creaking sound, the groan of wood under shifting weight. I turned the corner and saw that the front door had opened by itself. Cold air pressed in, smelling faintly of smoke and damp wood. "Who's there?" My voice broke the silence like glass. The answer came as a whisper behind me, right at my ear. "You opened the line." I spun around. The hallway was empty. The floor trembled slightly under my feet, just enough to make the light fixtures sway. A dark stain began to spread across the wallpaper near the baseboard, thin at first, then thicker, like moisture seeping from somewhere inside the wall. I stepped closer, and realized the pattern wasn't random. It was forming an outline, shoulders, arms, the faint curve of a head tilted downward. It was me. I stepped back, but the shape moved forward, pressing through the paper as though it were only mist. The air filled with the smell of burning varnish. I stumbled toward the kitchen, but the lights there flickered again and steadied into a dim yellow that made every shadow look alive. The sound of footsteps came from the ceiling now, measured, confident, pacing above. Then, a whisper floated down the stairwell, "Finally, I'm home." My heart pounded so hard I could feel it echo inside my throat. I forced myself to go upstairs, each step slower than the last. The smell of smoke grew stronger the higher I climbed. At the landing, the door to my bedroom was half open. Inside, the air shimmered with faint heat. The blanket had slid off the mirror. The glass glowed faintly, showing not my room but a darker space beyond it, a corridor filled with ash and faint flickers of orange light. When I stepped closer, I saw her. My mother stood in the reflection, exactly as she had the day before the fire, same gray sweater, same expression that hovered between love and sorrow. But her skin was pale as candle wax, and her eyes burned with a dull amber glow. She reached out a hand toward me, palm open. "Lola," she said softly. "You brought it back." The temperature in the room dropped so sharply that my breath turned white. I shook my head, tears burning at the corners of my eyes. "I didn't mean to. I just answered the call." Her smile deepened, and the crack running through the mirror widened, spidering outward with a dry hiss. "You always answer," she said. "Even when you shouldn't." The light bulb above me shattered. Darkness swallowed the room except for the faint glow inside the mirror. I could see her lips move, but the sound came from behind me now, all around me, from the walls themselves. "This house remembers me." The floorboards beneath my feet quivered as if someone was walking inside them. I stumbled backward, falling against the dresser. The mirror tilted forward slightly, and in that tilt, I saw the reflection of the fire from years ago, the burning wallpaper, the collapsing ceiling, my mother's silhouette at the center of it all. Then her eyes shifted toward me. "You took my mirror," she said, her voice calm but heavy. "Now I'll take yours." The crack reached the bottom edge, and the light vanished. I was left standing in silence, the darkness pressing close on every side. From downstairs, the old landline began to ring again. The ringing from downstairs didn't stop. It came in long, patient intervals, echoing through the dark like a heartbeat that belonged to the house itself. I stood in the hallway, frozen, watching the faint light from the mirror flicker across the walls. The air felt thicker than before, like breathing through cold smoke. "Don't answer it," I whispered to myself. But the ringing went on, louder now, more insistent, as if whoever, or whatever, was calling already knew I could hear. When I reached the bottom of the stairs, the light from the hallway bulb wavered and died. Only the small glow from the phone remained, a dull red pulse on the receiver. I lifted it with trembling hands. The line was open. At first, silence. Then, faint static, and beneath it, the same whispering tone I had come to know too well. "You can't hang up now." It was my mother's voice, but behind it, something else. Another version of me, layered under hers, repeating each word a half-second late, like an echo from inside a tunnel. I dropped the phone. It didn't break. It simply landed upright, the receiver swinging by its cord, and from the speaker came the sound of slow breathing. I turned toward the stairs. At the top, the mirror shone faintly through the darkness. I could see my reflection even from here, though the hallway was pitch black. It looked smaller than me, thinner, like it was leaning forward, waiting. Every instinct screamed to run, to leave the house and never return. But I couldn't. Some part of me needed to end it, to prove that it could still be ended. I climbed the stairs one step at a time. Each board groaned softly, as if reluctant to hold my weight. The moment I reached the landing, the temperature dropped again. Frost was forming along the picture frames, spreading outward from the bedroom door. I could hear the faint hum of the mirror, an electrical buzz mixed with something deeper, like a heartbeat made of glass. The door creaked open on its own. Inside, the mirror no longer showed my room. It was filled with gray smoke and slow-moving shapes that flickered like light behind fog. One of them stood still in the center. My mother. She looked exactly as before, eyes dim, mouth calm, but the longer I stared, the more I realized it wasn't just her. There were others behind her, half-formed, faces shifting, all turned toward me as though waiting to step forward. I reached for the hammer I'd brought from the kitchen drawer. My hand shook so badly that the metal tapped against the floor. "You can't have me," I said, though my voice barely rose above a whisper. In the mirror, my mother tilted her head. "You already let me in." Her voice wasn't in my ears anymore, it came from behind me. I turned sharply, and there she was, standing just beyond the doorway. Her skin was gray and cracked, her eyes hollow but somehow full of motion, like smoke trapped inside. She took one step toward me, and every light in the house went out. For a moment, total darkness. Then, the faint glow of the mirror returned, brighter than before. She raised a hand toward me, and I swung the hammer. The mirror shattered into 1,000 bright fragments, scattering across the floor like pieces of ice. The sound was deafening, a ringing so sharp it felt like it came from inside my skull. When it was over, the room was silent again. The reflection was gone. The glass lay still. I was alone. I stayed that way for several minutes, breathing hard, staring at the shards. Then, slowly, one of the fragments on the floor began to move. It slid an inch, then another, scraping softly against the wood. Others followed, pulling together into a rough circle. The tiny reflections within them shifted, not showing the room anymore, but a darker place. The image that formed wasn't random. It was the same room, but empty, no furniture, no light, only smoke curling from the walls. And in the center stood me. I blinked, and the figure in the glass blinked a moment later. I stepped back. It stepped forward. "No," I said quietly. "You're not real." The figure smiled. My smile. The glass pieces trembled, lifting slightly from the floor as if pulled by static. The sound of wind filled the room even though the windows were closed. Then, the fragments shot upward and froze in the air, forming the outline of a tall mirror again, cracked, but whole. My reflection stood inside it now, pressing her hands against the other side. Her lips moved soundlessly, but I could hear her voice all around me, "You shouldn't have moved the mirror." The light burst once, blinding white, and then everything went black. When I opened my eyes, I was standing in front of the mirror. But this time, the world inside it was calm, bright, and quiet. My reflection smiled faintly, lifted her hand in farewell, and stepped back, disappearing into the fog. Behind me, the house was still. The frost had vanished from the walls. The air smelled clean again, almost new. I thought it was over. I turned to leave, and that was when I saw it, the phone on the nightstand, the cord swinging slowly. The screen glowed. "Incoming call, Lola." The ringtone echoed through the house once, twice. I reached for it, but before I could touch it, the mirror cracked again from top to bottom, splitting my reflection in two. Police arrived 2 days later after a neighbor reported the constant ringing from inside an empty house. They found the front door unlocked, a shattered mirror in the bedroom, and a phone on the floor still flashing my name. No trace of me was ever found.